Sure. I'm Joanna Hersey, and I play the tuba and teach music and compose. And now, more recently, am working in leadership in education at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, here in Pembroke, North Carolina, where we have about 7,000 students on our campus. And so I do a variety of things for the College of Arts and Sciences, mostly focused on things that keep students being fully successful. So I still play concerts and attend things. I love researching and presenting research. So my life revolves around those things. And it's a busy calendar, but it lets me meet lots of other amazing people.
Amazing. It sounds like you've got a full life, but I can see the joy flowing out of you. So
In a
that's,
great, right, in a great way,
yeah.
not in a bad way at all.
Yeah. So the first question is like, what does being strong mean to you?
I think that we sometimes think of being strong as pushing, 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 and this hustle idea. And I think that it's it is that, but it's more than that. And I think being strong is really centering what is best for you amid all the distractions that come along to us. And that might look like toughing it out in certain situations, as we say, or that might look like saying no. And so it's more complicated to keep, and I think for women to keep our own what is best for us as the priority. And I think that is the strength.
Mm, mm. Very, very clear and concise, and maybe some advice I need myself. So thank you.
I was using it this week too, as I was thinking about our talk. Yeah.
And can you share an experience in your life where you had to be strong and how did you handle it?
Well, I think you're probably going to get a lot of these, but I think the COVID time was really something in my recent past that tested me. I'm a single mom. My son was, I think, maybe 9 in the 3rd grade when the COVID came. I was teaching full time. We were closed, our university closed for that brief spring during the COVID time, but then we opened back up in August fully face to face. And I was going in, working face to face. We didn't have vaccines. We tried to distance, and in the music department we got ventilators and we tried to take precautions, but it was a really scary time. And my son was doing the homework at the kitchen table, and I would leave him in the house by himself and go to campus. And that was very worrisome. I remember going to the grocery store and being in tears because of that, since we were also worried about being contaminated. And looking back, it's amazing to think, because now, and many of us, I've been vaccinated and boosted, but I've had COVID twice. And so I think it's a more normal part of our lives now. But I look back at that time, and my son didn't take to the COVID school. We were having tantrums on the floor. Like, it was that kind of thing. The southern rural schools where we are, I think, maybe struggled a little bit more than some to do the online instruction. It wasn't already in place. The teachers might have needed more professional development in that area. And so it was somewhat flawed and very frustrating for all involved. And I don't know how we made it through, but we did. We did it. My son is now in the 7th grade and he's doing fine. But that was a time when you just had to keep going with a sense that we have to do this. This is what's best. We're going to get through it. And that was a tough time.
Yeah, yeah. Curiously, you're my third interviewee, so I haven't had many answers yet. But one of the answers was very similar to that, but for a different
Yeah.
situation. Like, instead of the vision being for a few years, let's get it down to the hours, and I can get through this hour and this hour and this hour, rather
Right.
than overwhelming the time.
Right. And there was a sense that we just have to do this as a nation and as a world. And so I think that was helpful, but there were no tools. There was no path. And especially, when you're alone with a young one, that's just so difficult to figure out what's best. And we weren't relying on each other for support physically, only mentally. And yeah,
Mm.
difficult. That's the things that we might talk about today and that your series is going to show. I know that I can say that this series is going to show one of the key components of strength is having people in your corner. And while we had that mentally, we didn't have that physically. And that was, I think, one of the reasons why it was so difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. And thank you for saying that about the series, because I do want to raise the safety net, because I want us to have the
Yes.
fear of falling and to fall, but know that we don't have to fall far. So this is a safety net to show the way, but also give us the courage to keep trying and failing and not fear that.
Right, right.
Yeah. So Thinking about our role in society, how do you think societal expectations about women affect the concept of strength?
Well, it's interesting because I think we're fighting this sense of what being strong and tough is, which is what you're getting at with these questions and these discussions. And so when you're small of stature, perhaps as a woman, it seems like you couldn't possibly be strong, or we have these stereotypes and biases about what does it mean to be strong. And in athletics, I think on your side, you can really address that very directly. I'm strong because I did this in so many minutes, or whatever your definitions are in the fields for success in athletics. And that helps you in other fields like playing a brass instrument. It's hard because there isn't a measure of success other than that, does it sound really good? But when you're having a bias, then you can just decide it doesn't sound as good, even if it was the same. And there's not a sense of a clock or some kind of really clear, definitive, unbiased way to judge it. And so I notice here, for example, with in the South, there are less examples of strong women in leadership, perhaps in politics or in education. And the stats in America for full professors is still predominantly male and predominantly white. And our students may not come from backgrounds where they saw a lot of women in any kind of leadership or authority positions. And that's one of the things that I notice when they get here and they have a professor who might be more strict or rigid in their approach. It's hard for our students to work with that because they have no concept for having done so, and they don't view that as strength. Whereas if let's say that you were learning anatomy and physiology, a key course in something like nursing or the medical fields, you want your person to be very strict and rigid and regimented because these are hugely important concepts for the career in medicine, right?
Mm.
But it often comes across to the students as the professor's just mean. But they're not mean, there's just a standard. And I think that sometimes it's compounded by the fact that women in authority are rarer in certain circles, like brass music or higher education, especially in the sciences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's resonant. And it flows nicely into the next question about like what are the certain common misconceptions we've got around strength that you might have encountered?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That it looks a certain way, and that we're measuring it by odd metrics. And power, this comes into kind of the conversation about what is power. We have a phrase in tuba playing, because tuba playing is a good example of this. Outwardly, it looks like it would take a lot of strength. It's a big metal instrument and you need a lot of air. You also need a lot of air to play flute, but we don't have those same strength concepts about the flute because the flute has become more gendered towards female. And in our professional music world in the beginning, in classical music, all of those high level orchestral players were men on flute and clarinet and everything at the beginning. And now, because of screened auditions and because of coming in and trying to be more fair with the choosing process, I think we're finding that flute has gendered female. The perception people have of the instrument doesn't have any gender. It has got no gender, but we think of the instrument. So flute takes lots of air, but tuba somehow there's this masculinity to it. And so I think of that when I think of like, how does society define power? And when we play it, we know that it's just you're an athlete. If you force anything and you tighten and squeeze, not going to work. You have to be, and we say relaxed power as a player. You have to have your breath and it has to be in a flow, and it's not squeezing and tight, and you can't be, you're doing this for your whole life. You can't be squeezing. So we keep our shoulders down and we don't arch, and all these things that we're trying to do when we're teaching our students to get that just this fully relaxed flow. And if you do that very in a Zen way, then you're going to be really loud and tuba-like. But that's against the sense of, I'm going to get it, that we sometimes have. And I bet as an athlete, these are similar things that when you coach people, you talk about too. So we have to undo like this, for lack of a better term, kind of strong man, like that people might have, we don't think of strength, for example, as elderly women who live alone and power through their lives supporting their families. But that is also strength just as much.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'd love you to elaborate if possible, because I when I read this article about screened auditions, it really changed my concept of unconscious biases.
Yes.
Could you share what
Right.
auditions are and how they came about?
Right, exactly. So if you have a spot for, say, principal clarinet in the symphony, then everyone would troop in the same day, and 100 clarinets would play one by one, each for 10 minutes for a panel, probably in the big concert hall. And the panel would sit and everybody would take notes, and you would be number, 97 or whatever. And then 97 and 100 clarinets would play, and they would call back maybe 10 or 8, and you would look at them. So you're using your bias of what does a clarinet player look like, or what does, it's more obvious when you think of something like percussion or tuba. So if 97 tuba players troop in and they're all the big hefty guy that you're used to singing, and this goes back to the middle school instrument choosing process. Who's the band director going to put on tuba? Somebody who's big enough to carry it, right? So we have this like root of truth in that many tuba players are bigger kids. They've already been tall, maybe they have tall parents, and the band director is not thinking they're going to bias the whole system of professional music. They're just thinking, okay, there's a big kid, this tube is a pain in the neck to carry. And so we end up, if 97 tuba players cross the stage and they all look like these big, strong, and they can do it, and then one is a 5'2" blonde, lady who walks out there and she looks tiny, there's this sense that she wouldn't be able to do it. And you should of course listen, but if you see her before she plays, you are already thinking, oh, this won't be it. And all of us have these biases, right? It's the same with race. If you think that your idea of a tuba player is going to be a heavy set, really, beer drinking guy who, big and tall and wide, he's going to have lots of breath. If that's what you think it is, then anybody who doesn't look like that, race, gender identity, any of those things, they're not going to be who you choose. You're going to put that into what you hear. And so when the screen, so this sense of, well, if we put a screen up, and they literally either put, set design screens in front of the panel in the hall, or they put it on the stage, and you're walked out behind this, and there's a proctor out there with you, so you don't have to speak. If you had a question and your voice would give you away, we also lay carpet down so that the click of heels, most people wear comfortable shoes at an audition, but in case there were shoe clicks that would give gender away, we lay carpet down and we walk the person out and we speak for them. The proctor would, the contestant, or the candidate would like to know if they need to do this section as well, or you speak for the candidate. And so no words are spoken by the person that could give away anything, identity of any way. And once this became a thing, it started to come in with the women's movements and the civil rights movements in the 1960s here in the US. And after we did that, we started to see the numbers of musicians of color and women rise nationwide in the orchestras, because that bias went away. It is still, they still do bring the screen down at the very end. So sort of a compromise has been appeared, where if you got the 100 players down to the top 4, let's say, they're all going to be really good. And so at that point, you bring the screen down and you interact with them and their energy. Often you will play, like as a tuba player, I might play with the trombones. They'd bring them in and they would come. And so you can hear how the person fits in with the other sections of your existing orchestra. And at that point, the screen's down and you're fighting for your life at that point. But by then, perhaps, maybe you've proven and you've gotten outside of the bias, and that was successful. This is something that maybe, we already use in things that are peer reviewed, for example, that are scholarly, where there's no name attached and it's anonymous. This sense of helping each other out because of those biases we all have. Easier to just not have to worry about that in the beginning and let people show what they have in a neutral space.
Yeah, I absolutely adore that. And I use that example quite often in business as well, that we,
Yeah.
if we don't see, then we actually pick for the performance.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how has your understanding of strength influenced your personal approach to success and goal setting?
Yeah, and I think it's that I have to be really specific, because I, along with many, would be wanting to take it all and do it all. There is that sense that we need to hustle, right? I used that word before, and there's a lot of pushback against that concept of hustling, by which we mean doing everything you can possibly fit in and staying as busy as possible, because you don't know what of the things you're doing are going to win you something. So doing it all. And and I think that idea of strength, of just pushing through and toughing it out, matches that hustle. So we don't want that. We don't want this sense that I'm just going to push blindly forward and do everything because I don't know which one. And you don't know. You don't, it's like you shouldn't apply for just one job if you're job hunting, because you should apply for many. You don't know. And I think a concept of strength that centers what your exact goal is, as I said, what am I trying to do? and saying no strategically to the things that don't match that, which goes against that hustle concept that I'm supposed to take everything and be everywhere and be all of the things. But if I'm saying yes, like I still have a hard time with saying no. But when I say no, I celebrate it because if I said no, it really must not have been right. I'm kind of still bad at that. But this sense of you're strategic about your hustle. And so what you're leaving time for those things that you know where you're going with them, and being very specific about the goal setting so that you can see what it is, and reminding yourself, I'm in my office speaking to you, and past your face and screen is a wall of information where I have pasted up. I have calendars, I have a scrum board with my in progress and backlog, I have calendars and spreadsheets, and I have a checklist. Like I have this is the semester weeks, and we're checking off because we're in week 8. So I look at this to keep myself going. This is the semester by semester, right? The timeline for spring semester, where I can remind myself when I'm getting stressed out that I'm focused here in week 8 and what the tasks are for week 8. And so I think the danger is that feeling out of control because you have done too many yeses, and viewing that as strong, like I'm going to do this, I'm strong. But no, it's weakening you.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's very powerful. And you've touched on it a little bit as well, but from your own experience, what's one tip or technique you can share about developing and nurturing strength?
I think really specific reminders. And so, for example, I went back to school last year to get a second master's. I have a master's in the tuba, obviously. And we have a program here where we can take some classes at our sister universities with a tuition waiver as like professional development. So I'm doing a master's of gender and sexuality studies with a concentration in educational leadership. And I'm only taking 2 classes only. A full-time load is 3 for graduate school in the US, but I'm taking 2, and it's a lot. So I work all day in the university, and I go home, and I sit at night and I type and read and do dialogues. They're online classes. And so that's been difficult. That's been an example of taking off maybe more than you can chew, a lot. But I have a really, really big desire to get this degree. And one of the things that I'm using to keep myself going, and last night I pressed send on my big midterm exam. So yay. The the thing that's keeping me going is this specific goal of getting my nails done before the commencement ceremony. So I'm envisioning going to the nail salon, and because I full disclosure, I have 3 degrees. I did not walk at commencement. I did not participate with the cap and gown at any of my 3 commencements, just circumstances I wanted to, and then circumstances. So this one, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put on the cap and gown. I have a doctorate, but so this is again a 4th degree, but I'm going to walk in the ceremony with everything. And when I feel like I can't do it, and I'm feeling like, my being strong is turning into a bad idea. That's another thing. Once we start it, we really need to just persevere, right? We decided it. We have to know why we decided it. And then we use these. So I think of that going to the nail salon and sitting there and knowing that commencement is tomorrow and I've done it and the degree is mine, and posting on LinkedIn, or posting the picture of me in the cap and gown, which I never had. So things like that, keeping yourself focused on why you decided this, because you trusted that you decided it correctly. And it's not one of these yeses that you shouldn't have said. It's a real yes. And I'm strong for doing it, and it'll be great when I'm done. So yes, the little things, and a lot of peers, we touched on this earlier, peers that will support you and lift you up. One of the things we didn't talk about yet is there's so much negative energy the higher you rise. And
Mm.
if we're being truthful and honest in our talk, which we are, this can really hold you back. And you need to make sure that you're balancing the energies coming at you the best of your ability. You can't always. I had a piece of negative energy come at me this week, and you're just thinking, you're like trying to bat it out of the way because you're awesome and you're killing it. And you're balancing all of this negative energy, and some of it can get in further. But your goal is to find people like yourself and like this network that you're building. Who are you? And I can like peek my head up here in the pine trees at Pembroke, North Carolina, and I can see you over there in the UK, and I can wave at you. Hey, Kate, I know she's killing it over there. And that some of the negative energy that we're getting, we need to remember the circle. That's another big tactic for managing strength is it's happening. There are our colleagues that are doing it. They just might not be right around you. And keeping that in mind, I think is also helpful. If you rise really far from your current situation, people aren't happy.
Yeah.
Most people don't want that. They like what they know about you. They like where you have been. They may begin jealousies or other things that you're doing has set off in their personal journey. And they're not happy for you like you would be happy for them. And that's a challenge as you rise. And if we're equating, your personal journey with strength and perseverance, that is that can be a real thing that holding you back. So watching that network, and you might need to change networks. That's another theme you often see in leadership is leaving some people behind or some groups behind because they didn't come with you. That's it's so hard, but I think it's necessary if we want to find ourselves down the road to what we thought of for our path.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much wise words in there. And I wholly resonate with quite a lot of it. And if it's okay with you, I'll just
Yeah.
share one personal story to show when I got it wrong.
Please.
Because
Yeah.
I became an age group world champion in triathlon in 14 months of taking up the sport. So I rose exceptionally
Wow.
quickly to the top.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the network behind me. And so I was quite literally on the pedestal by myself. And then when I got injured and couldn't compete anymore, when I was struggling with my mental health and well-being, there was
Yes.
nothing to stop the free fall to the bottom. And the only thing that got me out of many months of questioning and crying was cleaning toilets. I got a 0-hour contract in a cafe and started from the ground up. But that was the only thing I could imagine doing. So I fell hard and fast, which is why I'm creating these networks to exactly share what you said. And people see you, we care for you, we want to support you, and we know you'll fall, and we're here to make sure you don't fall as far as, well, I had to, basically.
That's exactly right. And that phrase you just said, we know you'll fall. Any good goal setter, we're going to crash and burn. And that's okay because you don't get the wins without the crashes. I'm an audition, right? In music, we audition for things. You need to take 30 auditions before you can expect to get much anywhere. Even if you have early wins, right? You're still going to have to follow up. And that I think too, I see in our female students, especially that, and they're still the COVID group, right? That this young students that are college age, the traditional age of, under 25, they mistake something uncomfortable for being not right for them. When they're in something that's hard, difficult, uncomfortable, like anatomy and physiology at a collegiate, high level collegiate nursing program, for example, like we have. And when it gets uncomfortable and difficult, they pull back because they think, oh, self-care, it's uncomfortable. They have these buzzwords from TikTok and they, I'm being bullied. And these are important concepts, bullying and self-care. But I think we need to use them when there's true pain involved and not when it's just uncomfortable, and learning to teach that difference. Are you uncomfortable because you're being pushed to new territory? Are you uncomfortable because you had a success and then a flop?
Mm.
And that's not a bad thing. That's normal. And are you uncomfortable because of that? Try to hang in. Are you uncomfortable because somebody's being terrible to you? Yeah, you need to toxic. You need to let them go. But I think all things uncomfortable, some of those uncomfortables can be valuable. And switching gears, having a flop, learning again, getting a no from something that you had your heart set on. These are all good sort of training exercises that make us really uncomfortable. And all those tears you mentioned, sit down, have a good cry, get it all out, do the self-care. But that doesn't mean that you're not meant for it. And I see the students pulling out because they're uncomfortable with the learning and the growth. And we want to try to address that. If they don't have the role models, they're in their household, right? That persevered and that had this strength that we're calling keeping going toward a goal. They need this degree so they can have that life as a healthcare provider. And don't let the uncomfortable nature of it pull you back. That's when you use your strength.
Yeah. Yeah. So wise. So wise.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask the first question as the last question as well. So what does being strong mean to you?
Yeah, I think we all, you and I, when we get done with this call today, tomorrow, all week, we need to clarify what it is we want the most. And this means like, what do we get joy from? I get joy from higher education. I get joy from helping things. I get joy from performing, and center those things in the goals. And strength is keeping those centered and me not getting distracted by worrying about something that I can't control. And remembering that my stuff matters, my things matter. I'm strong because I'm showcasing me going after how I want my life to be and those joyful things as much as possible. And then along the way, we're responsible for stopping and turning back and helping the next. You're doing that. We're doing that as educators. It's not enough for me to just succeed. I need to turn around and showcase those tips and tricks, doing mentorship and all of those things. And I need to remember that being strong means that I can say no.
Amazing. Well, Joanna, I'm so grateful we connected on so many levels, and thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so much
it's
for
a
your
pleasure,
contribution.
Kate.
Yeah,
I can't wait to hear the rest of these. I know you're going to share them out on social media, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this new team of colleagues we can develop in this group together, and also this sense of whatever we're winning at and losing at as part of the journey. It's all different fields, it's all different types of collaborations, but it has these central themes in common, which is, I think, one of the really great ways we can connect. So I thank you so much.
thank you. And please, when you get your nails done, put that photo on LinkedIn. I want to see how beautiful your nails are, because to me that's the greatest win. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's all the hard work
exactly right.
as well. But yeah,
I'm going to get there.
amazing. But yeah. Again, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for your time and your valuable insights. It's been
Yeah,
amazing.
it's super to meet you. And I wish you all the best of luck with this project. It's a wonderful, wonderful concept.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, my heavy resistance is now editing it and promoting it. I don't like doing things like that. So that's my big rock at the moment.
I want you to think when you're having that moment of like, that you need to get it out there for my student who is going to quit anatomy and physiology because she's challenged by her female professor, who's a star doctor of science, right? The doctorate in the sciences. She feels uncomfortable because she's a young woman of color from a first generation family, and she has never had a strong woman who's successful in her circle before. And it's difficult and it feels scary. And she's unsure and she doesn't know if she can do it. That person would benefit from hearing your story, my story, all the stories. And that's why you have to market it, because it's not enough to just have it. You need her to see it.
Yeah,
So I need you to think of that girl.
I got tingles. So yes, it definitely works. It's not about,
Yes,
and it's not about my discomfort. It's about the mission.
right. Because your discomfort has a purpose.
Yeah,
It's not simply discomfort for the sake of why am I discomfort. Yeah, it's to the purpose of sharing the story to help those next ones. Yeah.
yeah. Vice versa. Thank you. Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you, Kate. It's great to see you this morning. Have a super weekend. I hope you get to do something fun for yourself.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm nomadic. I'm actually moving house. So I'm going to a little hamlet in the middle of nowhere and looking after some dogs in the field. So that's me.
I love that. That's awesome. And